Gopi Jana Jaya Gopi Jana Giri Pada Yamuna Gopi Jana Giri Pada Jaya Gopi Jana Giri Pada Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Radha Madhava Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Visipad Paramahamsa Pri Rajagacharya Stotra Satya Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Hirabhai Charanarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Sri Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki ISKCON BBC Founder Acharyas Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Namasarya Sri Hridayas Thakur Ki Samavat Bhakti Vrinda Ki Harinam Sankirtan Ki Kantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jainita Gaura Premanande. All glorious to be assembled devotees, all glorious to be assembled devotees, all glorious to be assembled devotees, all glorious to Sri Guru, to Sri Gauranga, all glorious to Sri Prabhupada. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Dakshurunditam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Jita Parakamalam Sri Gurum Vaisnavam Sya Sri Rupam Sahajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Sakanditam Sya Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Taptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Veshabhanu Sitilivi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarudhyasya Kripa Sindhu Devasha Patitanam Pavanabhyam Vaisrayo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudire. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a very means of conquest, let us first offer respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Nara Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Sridham Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayasha Badrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Tamasloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishiki. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering a service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within our heart becomes destroyed or practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, whose praise with transcendental songs becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahmasamitam Uttamaśloka Charitam Sakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swasaya Namaha. The Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Grantaraj, the king of all Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God, the Sridham Vyasa. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Vasudevaya Namaha. Om Vasudevaya Namaha. Om Vasudevaya Namaha. Mukam Karudachalam Pangum Nagayate Girim Yakripa Tamaham Bande Sri Gurum Dinatha Yakripa Tamaham Bande Sri Gurum Dinatha. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Bhagavatam class. We are continuing from Canto 7, Chapter 13, entitled The Behavior of a Perfect Person. We had mentioned about 2 verses yesterday, 26 and 27. We have not covered 27 yet, so we are doing 27 today. Sukham asyatmano rupam sarva iha uparati tanuhu manaha samsparshajan drishtva bhogan sapsyami samvishan sukham asyat marorupam saveho paratistanuhu mana samsparshajan drishtva Bhogan Swapsyami Samvishan Sukham Syatmano Rupam Sadeho Paratistanu Mana Sampar Sajan Dristva Bhogan Swapsyami Samvishan Sukham Syatmano Rupam Sarveho Paratistanu Mana Samsparshajan Dristva Bhogan Swapsyami Samvishan Sukham Syatmano Rupam Sadeho Paratistanu Mana Samsparshajan Dristva Bhogan Swapsyami Samvishan Sukham, happiness, asya, of him, atmanaha, of the living entity, rupam, the natural position, sarva, all, iha, material activities, uparatihi, completely stopping, tanahu, the medium of its manifestation, mana samsparshajan, produced from demands for sense gratification, dristava, after seeing, bhogan, sense enjoyment, sapsyami, I am sitting silently, thinking deeply about these material activities. Samvishan, entering into such activities. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. So this is the continuing exchange between the saintly person and Prahlad Maharaj. The actual form, and this is a saintly person speaking at the request of Prahlad Maharaj, who wanted to hear from him. The actual form of life for the living entities is one of spiritual happiness, which is real happiness. This happiness can be achieved only when one stops all materialistic activities. Material sensory is simply imagination. Therefore, considering the subject matter, I have ceased all material activities and am lying down here. Kindly repeat after me. The actual form of life for the living entities is one of spiritual happiness, which is real happiness. How many types of happiness are there? 3 types. What are they called? The one that most people know about is material happiness. Material happiness. Second one? Yes. So first type of happiness is referred to as material happiness, bhoga. In the lecture, Prabhupada explains it in this way. There's bhoga, tyaga, and seva. So bhoga is material happiness on the gross bodily platform. Then tyaga is those who renounce material activities and take up spiritual life. They become tyagis and they are cultivating spiritual life. That is called spiritual happiness. But there's a higher level. Actual spiritual happiness is seva. Bhoga, tyaga, then seva, which is bhakti. So therefore, when we were explaining yesterday, I think, or the day before, how sex life is not natural, we can understand from this statement here how this is true. Because material sex life is not real happiness, is not giving us real happiness. Rather, that material sex life in the material world is a cause of so much distress. The more one engages in that type of happiness, in any kind of material happiness, the more we increase our material happiness, we actually increase our material distress. We don't understand it immediately. Otherwise, people would not engage in material happiness, so-called material happiness, knowing that that material happiness is actually the cause of our material distress. This can only be understood by devotees. How material happiness increases increases our distress. Increases our material distress because it keeps us on the bodily platform and prevents us from actually uncovering or knowing, realizing our actual real state of happiness. So I'll just read the text here again. The actual form of life. Oh, okay. I think you're. So second line. This happiness can be achieved. You can repeat. This happiness can be achieved. Only when one stops all materialistic activities. Material sense enjoyment is simply imagination. Therefore, considering this subject matter, I have ceased from all material activities and am lying down here. Yeah, purport. The difference between the philosophy of the Mayavadis and that of the Vaishnavas is explained herein. Both the Mayavadis and Vaishnavas know that in materialistic activities there is no happiness. Yes. The Mayavadi philosophers, therefore, adhering to the slogan Brahman Satyam Jagan Mithya, want to refrain from false materialistic activities. They want to stop all activities and merge in the Supreme, the Brahman, according to the Vaishnava philosophy. However, if one simply ceases from materialistic activity, one cannot remain inactive for very long. And therefore, everyone should engage himself in spiritual activities, which will solve the problem of suffering in this material world. It is said, therefore, that although the Mayavadi philosophers strive to refrain from materialistic activities and merge into Brahman, and although they may actually merge in the Brahman existence, for want of activity, they fall down again into materialistic activity. Aruhya Krishrena Param Padam Tata Patanti Ada. Prabhupada quoted this verse again and again and again. That without knowledge of the Param Brahman, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot be satisfied simply in so-called Brahman realization. Therefore, the stage of Brahmananda is not real happiness. Beyond Brahmananda, we come to know by the philosophy of Vaishnava philosophy. Beyond Brahmananda, there is Premananda. So that's the whole philosophy, which is very elaborately explained actually by our Vaishnava acharyas, in particular by Srila Jiva Goswami in his Sandarbha, the Sat Sandarbhas. So the last of the Sandarbhas, the sixth of the Sandarbhas, is actually called Kriti Sandarbha. Kriti Sandarbha. And the one before that, the fifth one, is called Bhakti Sandarbha. It's very nicely very nicely arranged, following actually the mind of great personalities works in a very methodical way. Following, they're so fixed up, they're so profoundly realized on basic principles like Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana. The first four of the Sandarbhas is explaining about some Sambandha Gyan, beginning with Tattva Sandarbha. What is actual Tattva? Actual Tattva, actual truth is that there's something beyond what we see. Just like here it's mentioning here, material happiness is imagination. We are living in a world, well, material world is called the world of illusion, Maya. Maya is the world of illusion. But it's a very powerful Maya because we are all caught up with Maya. And unless one is very just like this saintly sadhu here, he's telling how he's just meditating on this, thinking about this. And most people don't even stop to think about it. We, as devotees, we think about it sometimes, but not all the time. I mean, we should be thinking about it all the time. Whenever we do something, we should be deciding to do based on whether this is according to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. We should follow this pravriti nivriti marga. Pravritim cha nivritim cha jana navidur asura. So that is the position of the vast majority of people in the world. They don't have this knowledge or this understanding. So Prabhupada is, of course, picking up here, especially regarding the difference between Mayavad and Vaishnava philosophy. So it is said, therefore, that although the Mayavadi philosophers strive to refrain from materialistic activities and merge in Brahman, and although they may actually merge in the Brahman existence, for want of activity, they fall down again. Yeah, we just read this. Thus, the so-called renouncer, unable to remain in meditation upon Brahman, returns to materialistic activities by opening hospitals and schools and so on. Therefore, simply cultivating knowledge that materialistic activities cannot give one happiness, and that one should consequently cease such activities, is insufficient. It is insufficient. One should cease from materialistic activities and take up spiritual activities, then the solution to the problem will be achieved. So therefore, the importance, which is stressed especially in our Vaishnava philosophy, of being active for Krishna, of utilizing this body in the service of Krishna, of dovetailing, of spiritualizing. Prabhupada will use the term to Krishnaize our activities. Yeah, that is, Prabhupada explains here, the solution, actual solution to the problem. Spiritual activities are activities performed according to the order of Krishna. Anukulena Hare Krishna. Anukulena Krishna Shilanam. If one does whatever Krishna says, his activities are not material. If one, where is this? Yeah, if one does whatever Krishna says, his activities are not material. So therefore, Krishna's fighting on the battle of Kurukshetra was purely a devotional activity. His killing hundreds and thousands of individuals on the battle of Kurukshetra was purely a devotional activity without incurring any karma. Fighting for sense gratification is a materialistic activity, but fighting by the order of Krishna is spiritual. Of course, one has to be cautious about how to decide that. But the basic principle is there. By spiritual activities, one becomes eligible to go back home, back to Godhead, and then enjoy blissful life eternally. Here, in the material world, everything is but a mental concoction that will never give us real happiness. So one of the earlier devotees was hearing from Srila Prabhupada in the beginning, but could not understand how here in the material world, whatever concept of happiness we have is a false concept, is not real. Again and again, Prabhupada would remind us, would very strongly state, actually there is no happiness in the material world. What most people are running after, material happiness, especially in the matter of sex life, is, as we are hearing from this Brahmana, saintly person, this Brahmana sadhu, is but actually imagination. It is capturing all conditioned souls. So everything is but a mental concoction that will never give us real happiness. The practical solution, therefore, is to cease from materialistic activities and engage in spiritual activities, but specifically to engage in spiritual activities of a devotional nature, not simply tyaga, as we mentioned. Bhoga, tyaga, and seva, or bhakti. One who is serious, one who is fortunate also to practice spiritual life will come to the level of bhakti or seva. Yagyartat karmano nyatra lokayam karma bandhana. If one works for the sake of pleasing the Supreme Lord, Jagya or Vishnu, one is in liberated life. If one fails to do so, however, he remains in a life of bondage. So again, that same verse, often quoted also by Srila Prabhupada, Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami Sakale Ashanta. So even those who are so-called Gyanis or yogis, if they are not knowing about bhakti, if they're not engaged in devotional activities, they cannot actually be satisfied. They cannot actually be happy. So just reading the verse again, this is verse 27 from the 13th chapter of the 7th canto. 7, 13, 27. Translation, the actual form of life for the living entities is one of spiritual happiness, which is real happiness. This happiness can be achieved only when one stops all materialistic activities. Material sense enjoyment is simply imagination. Therefore, considering the subject matter, I have ceased from all material activities and am lying down here. Not many people will do that. Stop all materialistic activities and stop and like this Avadut actually. So it is Narada Muni relating this story, very old story, that this incident that happened long time ago, and that somehow is recorded of Prahlad Maharaj wandering with his close associates, purposely wandering. Nowadays, people wander for sense gratification or have no reason. But traveling used to be taken up for spiritual purposes, isn't it? We are not against traveling. But actually, it should be meaningful. There should be a purpose. So people usually would not travel so much actually previously. There were much less facilities, and in one sense, it's much better that there are less facilities. Otherwise, all of the so-called nice facilities that we have for traveling are disrupting us in so many ways and disrupting the whole material nature for that matter. And very complex, very unnecessarily complicated. I mean, you're just coming. We won't ask you any details of your flight and whatnot, but yeah, they're very complicated. You know, all of the so-called advantages of flying. I mean, when you're up there, 30,000 feet in the sky, if you're a devotee, you chant Hare Krishna. Because you never know what can happen. I mean, it's kind of like insane actually to go 30. When you think about it, why would anyone in their sane mind go 30,000 up in the sky, not knowing that I mean, they could. Yeah, we are voluntarily we because of this modern, nice, very sophisticated, ongoing publicity propaganda. We take it as natural. But every time we step in a car, every time we step in a plane, we are putting our life at risk actually. So therefore, people used to, but they used to travel by walking, and their purpose for traveling was spiritual. They would go on pilgrimage. Now, majority of people are traveling. That like they have these holiday traveling. People go on tours, not pilgrimage. Practically no one, only devotees. So this is the main message in the verse today, that actually see how powerful is Krishna's energy. Krishna's material energy is so powerful that it has convinced everyone that we can be happy by doing this, or by just by adjusting things a little bit. If I can just get a better job and get a few more thousand rupees a month, all my problems are solved. If I can get a better car, or whatever, in Dubai. Have you been to Dubai yet? Not yet. In Dubai, you'll come to know there are two things that people are crazy about. I was told. One is that every other day they change their cell phone. They're constantly upgrading, not only online, but they're upgrading. They're changing their cell phone. And people who make cell phones, they know that the people are the new model, the latest model, right? Gadgets. People are just like crazy about gadgets. So, and the second thing for which people are crazy, because people have money in the Gulf countries, and maybe not most people, but a lot of people have money. That's why some people like you are interested too, for Krishna. But the second thing that people are crazy about is cars, changing cars. That's why here in India, for so many years, people were satisfied with the ambassador. Had a nice name, and but then somehow we practically don't see any ambassadors now, right? It's very rare. Only sometimes a few ministers, the old school. Look at that. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So people are crazy after these different, what we call, material allurements, because of their being devoid of proper knowledge and understanding. And and the more people are allowing themselves to be captivated and involved and engaged in these materialistic activities, the more they are increasing their entanglement and suffering ultimately in the material world. So therefore, it is not at all easy to convince people. It's not easy to convince people they're not happy, or that there is no happiness in the material world. But this one devotee, Malati Devidasi, Malati Mataji, Malati Devidasi, she was telling, that was one of the first instructions I received from Prabhupada. Prabhupada actually convinced me that there is no happiness in the material world. Otherwise, unless we become completely, fully, 100% convinced of this fact, of this reality, then we won't engage in any kind of materialistic activities of sense gratification. But because we do, that means we're still lacking in conviction. So this particular saintly person he's mentioning here, I've thought about this a lot. He's telling, and I meditate on this. That's why I decided that I'm going to stop all these activities, and I'm just going to sit here and meditate on this. And of course, this sadhu, we will come to know, has come. He became self-realized in this way. Those who are fortunate to have this understanding, to the extent they have actually realize, naturally they will apply in their own lives. And to the extent that we apply in our own lives, in other words, that is called sadachar. Achar or sadachar, and then prachar. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stressed on these two things, that ideal devotee is one who has good behavior. This is okay. That's the title. That's the title of the chapter here. The behavior, the behavior of a perfect person. Yeah. So that is called sadachar. Prabhupada would, in the context of America, he would say, to become a devotee means to become a perfect gentleman. To become a perfect gentleman, to be sensitive, to be aware, to be conscious of others. So therefore, I think, I forget, one sannyasi one time in a lecture mentioned, before we become Krishna conscious, we must learn to become conscious. First become conscious, then become Krishna conscious. First become a human being, then become a superhuman being. I think it was Radhanath Maharaj or one of our sannyasis was mentioning that we are sometimes so preoccupied in being spiritual that we lose out or we forget or neglect to be human in terms of our dealings with one another. And because, as we are reading in this purport, there is the danger of Mayavad philosophy, which is impersonalism, ultimately, impersonal philosophy. So impersonal means we are not able to actually care for others. We are lacking in this personal aspect. When we are lacking in this personal aspect of Godhead, we will naturally be lacking in our personal aspect between human beings, in our dealings between human beings. So this is, there are 26 qualities of a Vaishnava. One of them is one who is very thoughtful. I forget the Sanskrit name for that. But Muni is traditionally, Muni means one who is thoughtful, who is very, very much looking at things in such a way as to properly understand. So this is, yeah, the message this morning in this particular verse. So any thoughts or comments on this?
Here, this Brahmana looks like Ajadara would take an Ajadara. Maybe inactive in a material life, but he's not active. It's
But he's not.
is actually this is all material activities, but he's not in active.
He's not.
Active in spiritual activity. Which purport explaining that serious material activity, but he still takes spiritual activity. Then he will get the spiritual activity. But the here Brahmana is like not going anywhere. Just
Okay, so you're making the point that actually this, in the purport, Prabhupada explains that actual level of transcendental realization is to come to the understanding that we should be properly active, spiritually active. Whereas this particular Brahmana is totally inactive. He's just lying down there. So the idea is that, you know, there are different stages. I'm sure that after his conversation with Prahlad Maharaj, because it is not that those who are impersonal in their understanding are necessarily stuck being there. Prabhupada explains that actually, unless one is fortunate to come in contact with a Vaishnava, then the person will not know about spiritual activity, isn't it? So we are all, every single living entity in the material world is on his journey towards higher understanding, increasing our level of consciousness. So we have to wait for other purports and other the other or the rest of the conversation to find out what will be the outcome. It is indicating that one needs to be thoughtful, number one, to the point of as this saintly person is understanding, to the point of being convinced that there's no happiness in the material world, that there's no happiness by any kind of material pursuit or material activity. Any kind of, this was the realization of this particular individual, this sadhu. Now, I don't know if after his contact with Prahlad Maharaj, whether he shaved up and became a devotee or not. Because he, being an avadut and lying down as a python, as explained in the beginning of that chapter, he must have had long hair. Right? So, in our Vaishnava Sampradaya, I mean, we see especially people who are generally Mayavadis, long hair and beard. Like our Dadu, or Mayapur Dadu many years ago. Yeah. And so that was his kind of similar situation. I mean, I don't think he was lying on the ground, but he was lying in a cave. He was stuck up in a cave somewhere in the Himalayas, and for many years. And we could understand that when he came to Mayapur. I was mentioning this story some 2 days back, because when he came to Mayapur, he wasn't very. He was probably the height of Prabhupada, not so tall, and that made a big contrast, because the matted hair that he had when he came first to Mayapur was touching the ground. So his matted hair was actually longer than him. Thick, heavy. I don't know. You had to carry it, I guess. Yeah. So he had been doing some serious meditation in a cave. So, but then, because he all of a sudden one fine day, due to providence or destiny, he got a Bhagavad darshan, back to Godhead, Bengali Bhagavad darshan, and he saw some foreign sadhus, unusual. to see foreigners wearing tilak, like that. And he saw the address, Sridham Mayapur. So he descended from, not Vaikuntha, he descended from the Himalayas and came to Mayapur. So because we could see, because of book distribution, he came in contact, like so many of us, like it is happening every single day. People who on their journey are like ready for this. They get it, Krishna sends a devotee, sends them this knowledge, this information, and then they take up the Krishna consciousness. Yeah, especially this knowledge of Bhagavatam. One devotee has a world record for distributing the largest number of books in one day. Broke his own record recently. Maybe you heard about it. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
US.
in the US. He distributed in one day, you cannot believe it, over 3,000 books.
US.
And I was hearing he was interviewed, how in the world did you do that? How is this even humanly possible? So he was very determined. He had set a record before, maybe of over 1,000 or maybe 2,000 books, and he wanted to break the record. Just he wanted, because he was selling, records are meant to be broken. And within not that long, it's not that he started at like 5 o'clock in the morning. He started his book distribution that day at 11 o'clock. And so he thought the only way I can break my record, is that I have to distribute sets of books, sets of Bhagavatam. Just like normally book distributors, they one book, even to distribute one book is a big job. So the whole of this kind is based on book distribution, of course, and there are stories that will make your hair, for those who have hair, stand on end. Wait. So, if you don't have hair, you'll get goosebumps, something. So he was selling, very interesting. I happened to hear it a few days back. He was selling that because he became so, animated, so full of life, so inspired, that whoever he came in contact with is like, super soul within the heart just told him, buy whatever he's selling, or listen to him or whatever. And it's like when happiness is something that is contagious. If someone is always jolly and happy, comes in contact, other people also become happy. So he was telling that to a few people, that he said that actually one person didn't buy only one set, bought 3 sets. He was so enthusiastic. Yeah, I have to give this to my friends also, or to my children or whatever. And then he said that a few people to whom he sold the set, because it's like a mindset. One has to be like really what we call into it, because we of course always, not always, but at times we stop and glorify the Bhagavatam, and how these literatures are like so important, so profound. I mean, they have the potency of completely changing the lives of individuals, and they have the potency of changing the whole world, actually. isn't it? Otherwise, why are we reading and distributing these books, right? But so he was telling that, I don't know, he must have conveyed in his enthusiasm to people, to some of the people that he was distributing these sets. I mean, set of books. Means he had these sets right there with him. And he convinced, naturally, whoever about a book, they were convinced, but he convinced some of these people so profoundly, he touched them in the heart so profoundly that when they received the book, it was like receiving God himself. They were crying. They were crying in gratitude that, my God, I never knew such books existed. I never thought that, you know, such books are there who can actually that can save my life, that can teach me about how to stop the suffering in the material world, etc. You know, which is actually how those who distribute books, or for that matter, do any kind of preaching, they need to have different, you know, levels of realization. That is called Vigyan, which is only possible when Krishna empowers. That verse is there actually in the Shastra. Kali Yuga Dharma Harinam Sankirtan Krishna Shakti Bina Nahi Tar Pravartan. Krishna Shakti Bina Nahi. Without this Krishna Shakti, without being empowered by Krishna, you know, Srila Prabhupada was empowered by Krishna. Therefore, he's like, not like, he is Shaktivish Avatar. Shaktivish Avatar, especially empowered by Krishna. So unless one becomes empowered by Krishna, one cannot do anything, especially such such kind of activities. I mean, 3,010 or whatever books in less than one day. Inconceivable. Of course, for a Krishna Bhakta, nothing is inconceivable, or nothing is impossible, as Prabhupada would explain. So, any other? So we can stop here for now. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Sridham Prabhupada ki, Thank you, Gaur Nandi, Hare Krishna.